Antonio Hart, how are you doing?
Wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How's your family?
Thanks for asking, man. My immediate family is doing well, um, but unfortunately lost a lot of music family, in recent times. So it's been a real hard couple months, and just the news of the passing of Master Jimmy Cobb, you know, really hit me hard. So it's been a really rough period for everybody, I'm sure.
Yeah, uh, uh, so many. I interviewed Antoine Roney, and of course his brother passed recently.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And yeah, it's yeah, it, it's real.
Yeah, man. Didn't have to happen this way. You can say that, like I lost my mentor, Master Heath, early this year, but it wasn't because of the virus, but, still dealing with that, man, because he was like a father to me. And, McCoy Tyner and Wallace and Lee Konitz and just, I mean, so many people. And now Master Cobb, who I had a chance to play with him for several years with Nat Adderley. So I was able to build a relationship with him, and I'll cherish those memories and those times on the bandstand with him and traveling on the bus. But it's a huge blow to the world of music. I mean, jazz community, but it's a huge blow to the world, man, because these are the icons, man. These are the fathers that are like gone, So it makes me think about what my responsibility is to the music, since I had that opportunity to be with the masters and learn from them, not just in a university setting, but the university of the streets, as they say.
Right. Um, Antonio, can you tell us about yourself? Can you tell us where you're from and where you grew up, and
Sure.
what your childhood was like?
Grew up from Baltimore, Maryland, and grew up single parent home. My mom did an amazing job growing up. Normal childhood, man. We saw some things that were kind of rough growing up without the parent in the house, and for a time we stayed with my grandparents, and before we moved out. But normal childhood, man. Spending a lot of time outside playing, and my grandmother had a really nice house with land, so you can explore the backyard and lift up rocks and see snakes, or you might see rabbits, or those kind of things. And we spent a lot of time outside. This is before I got into music or anything, man. It was just enjoying it, just enjoying being a child. I think I had a really nice childhood in some respects.
Now, when did you start playing, and sort of what were some of the sort of uh, uh, pre circumstances that maybe facilitated that? Like, what kind of music was going on in the house growing up, um, and did you have some early mentors or some folks that you saw play,
Hmm.
early on that said, "Hey, that's something that I want to do."
Well, in terms of house, it was Motown, whatever was popular on the radio. Definitely wasn't jazz. That wasn't part of my upbringing. But like Smokey Robinson, Donny Hathaway, Marvin Gaye. I remember the Floaters. You remember the song Float On," all that stuff that from that period. Um, that's what I heard. That's what my mom pretty much listened to. Jackson 5, things like that. But I was in elementary school, and we had an assembly, and they had this band on the stage. I remember, I can still see it today. And this guy had like all these things in front of him. It was like four or five of these things. I didn't know what it was, but he blew into it, I was like, I don't know what that thing is, but I want to learn how to play that. And that was like the whole spark of me wanting to pick up a saxophone before I even knew what the name of it was. I heard it, it resonated with my spirit, and I said I want to do that. So I found out who the music teacher was at the school, but I was too young, so I had to wait a year before I could actually play in a band. And I remember going to him and saying I want to play, and he said you have to get a reed. And I was like, "What is the reed? It's this thing you put on the saxophone." And my mom took me to the mall at that time. It's called Mondawmin Mall, and they had like a record store, but they sold reeds, right? So she bought me one reed, and I didn't know about caring for a reed or anything, so I would carry it in my sock because my the music teachers would go from different schools, you know, so it would be a couple days at that school, blah blah blah. And by the time he got there, from me carrying his reed in my sock every day, it was all chipped, and you know, he was like, man, I don't know if we can get this to work, but we'll try. And he put it on the mouthpiece, and he played a concert F a D on the on the alto saxophone, and he got a sound out of it. And I was like, okay, it works, and then I was able to do it, and that was the beginning, man. That was like the true beginning of wanting to play the saxophone. And you know, I did that through elementary school, and then I went to junior high school, and I went to a junior high in Baltimore, man. That was pretty rough. It was rough. They closed it down. It was a rough place, man. And in terms of education, I wasn't getting too much education. For me, it was like daycare for older students, you know. And the one thing that made me want to go to school is the fact that I could play the saxophone. I could be in a band. That was my only reason for wanting to go to school. And had some trials and tribulations there. It was just, I loved school, but because I had to fight because I did my homework, I had to fight because I could play a little song on the saxophone and the girls liked it, so the gangsters were jealous, you know, that kind of thing. And in my ninth grade year, they cut out all the music and art in the public school. So I would have gone into my ninth grade year with no music. So that would have been a travesty for me, man, because that was the only reason I was going to school at that particular point. And a friend of mine was going to the newly open performing arts school in Baltimore. It was 3 or 4 years old at that time, so it was pretty new. And excuse me, somehow he got me an audition for the school. I don't know how he did it, but he got me an audition, and they called my house and they said, "We want you to come Monday for this audition." I remember, and you know, you have to prepare a piece and know some scales. And I stayed up on the phone with my friend and practicing this piece over the phone. And so my mom and stepfather took me down to this place. It was a converted hotel they made into the school. Gorgeous place, you know, intimidating. And this is around the time of fame, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
so I get there and they take me in a room. It's three professors, teachers in the room. They take me in there and they say, play this scale. I could play the scale. And they say, well, play what you had prepared. So I played this piece, but I was making a mistake in the same place. And the guy was like, in this measure, can you play this? And I would make the same mistake. And he's like, well, are you reading it? I said, I think I am. He said, you know, you making a mistake? I said, well, he said, how did you learn? I said, I learned it on the phone the other night, you know? And at that point, I thought I wasn't going to get in because it was a private school, it's a public school, but you had to audition to get in. So I thought that I wasn't going to make it in. And to my surprise, through God's grace, I got in. They accepted me. And this was like a total culture shock for me in a lot of ways. One, academics were for real, like for real, right? So I got there and I didn't have that training, man. I almost got kicked out because I didn't have the grounding from the beginning to know how to study and know to kind of, you know, do these things. So I had to go to summer school for French and English, probably something like that. I went to summer school that year. I just knew, and I spent many nights on my knees, like, God, you got me here. Please don't let me get kicked out of this place, because I knew what the high school would be like that I would have to go to. And man, I just worked my butt off. I worked really hard and got my academic game together. And tried to grow musically. And it was, like I said, it was a culture shock because now I'm going to school with Caucasian, Asians, and all these students, exchange students from different parts of the world. Little girls running around in leotards, Lord, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, whoa, what is this? I'm loving this. And, and then getting exposure to all the different arts, like, the European classical tradition, because that's what we were studying. It wasn't a jazz thing at that time. And, the visual arts, the theater, and the dance, of course. So like, we were exposed to a lot of things, and it was the best thing that it could have happened to me. So after graduating from there, I went to Berklee College of Music, and that was the start of my journey in jazz. I knew that I didn't want to be a classical saxophonist. Number one, I didn't see anybody look like me playing classical saxophone. I didn't see anybody look like me playing in the orchestras, playing saxophone. There are not too many pieces with saxophone. But when I listened to the radio, I saw Grover Washington Jr., and I saw these
Mm.
people. And then I discovered Sonny Stitt. I discovered Charlie Parker. And later, people like John Coltrane. And I was like, these people look like me. I feel this music. And then there was this whole idea of improvisation that really blew my mind, because in the European classical tradition, at least when I started studying, because early on, like Haydn and Liszt and Mozart, and those guys were improvisers. But, what I played was through composed. Everything was written, dynamics from the beginning, articulation from the beginning to the end, with a level of creativity within that, construct. So the idea of like being able to create something myself really intrigued me. So when I went to Berklee, I went there as a classical saxophone player, wanting to learn how to play jazz. So I had to like start like from the ground zero, man. I started in the lowest ensembles, the lowest everything, and I just practiced like crazy, man, because I wanted it. I had to get a job because mom couldn't afford, pay for anything in college. So I was working. I would go to class, man, and I practice 12, 13 hours a day. I wake up 2 o'clock in the morning and go practice, and I just did that. I had headphones on. I was always listening to music. I remember I had a record player that I bought. It was like a combination radio record player. And I would listen to Night of the Cookers every morning, man. I was listening to Lee Morgan and Freddie Hubbard and James Fall every morning. And then my teacher, Bill Pierce, told me the stuff to practice, and I did that. And man, slowly I got better, and started getting some respect and being called to do things around college, playing around town. And shortly after, and at that time Berklee was amazing, man, because Layla Hathaway was there. This lady named Paula Cole, she wrote the theme song. It was a TV show called Dawson's Creek. She wrote that
Mm.
theme song. Abe Laborio, his father's a famous bass player. Abe is the drummer, played with Paul McCartney and Sting. In fact, I saw him in Europe with Sting. Who else was there? Famous tenor player Mark Turner was there.
Mm.
Seamus Blake was there. Mark Whitfield had graduated. It was incredible, bro. Like, all these people that like are considered like icons, Kirk Rosenwinkel, they were just my classmates. We were just all doing our thing. But the big classmate was Roy Hargrove. So Roy showed up, and we just had a connection, man. We had a connection right away. He was already famous. When he got there, we already knew who he was. We heard the buzz. And, we played together. We enjoyed each other. And he got signed to RCA. And he asked me to join his band, man. And that was the beginning. I think he moved to New York a year before me. I stayed in Boston to get my degree. And we recorded his first recorded Diamond on the Rough. And man, we were touring Europe, Asia. It was unfreaking believable, man. Like, I never dreamt it, brother. Because I started later than everybody else. My thought was, I'm the first to go to school, so I was going to go to school, get my bachelor's, my master's, and my PhD. Go back home, be a music teacher, have my family. Just do that, set an example for my kids, and hopefully, I said, if I'm good enough one day, maybe somebody might let me record on one of their records one day. I would have been happy with that. I'd have been great, you know. But God had other plans for me, man. And so we went on the road, recorded Roy's record, and then I got signed to RCA my senior year in college. I was doing my teaching, my student teaching for my, because I was a music ed major. So I had to do a semester of that, a year of that, excuse me. And then I moved, as soon as I graduated, 3 days later, I moved to New York to go to grad school, go to Queens College. And I went there to study with Jimmy Heath. So while I was getting my master's, I was touring around the world with Roy and then making my records and stuff like that, which it was difficult, but I got the master's, and then I left Roy and I started my own band, and as well as playing with Pop and Nat. And then it was a great time, man, because I was in a recording studio all the time, man. I recorded with so many different people, man. It was a really fruitful period, a growing period, and I'm really thankful for that, because I don't think that exists anymore like that. And you know, I think that's why I'm feeling so much emotion about these guys leaving, because they were like my musical fathers, but these are the people I traveled with. These are the people I recorded with. These are the people I learned from, you know, and they've given me so much. I'm just so thankful for that. So I hope I didn't talk too long, but that's my
Oh no,
story.
no, no. This is
Yeah,
this is all about us learning about Antonio Hart. Um,
good.
uh, I was thinking back at when we met. We met once. We never played together. We know a lot of the same folks, folks
Hmm.
like Vincent Chandler and Rodney Whitaker, and uh, and Vincent actually introduced me to you at a uh, it was in Detroit. So one of the jazz festivals in
Okay.
Detroit, the Montreux Detroit
Hmm.
Jazz Festival,
Great.
and and I've been a fan of yours for a long time. You're uh, one of the alto players you know that I steer my students towards. Checking out, um, transcribing. I've had a number of my students transcribe you, um, and in particular, uh, there's a record that let's see here, Alto Summit with Vince Herring and Phil Woods and
Hmm.
Antonio Hart, right? Uh, and which is a great recording, and it's one that I constantly have my students check that out, reference it, transcribe stuff. I've had a couple students transcribe on a couple of uh, the tunes. Everybody, like, and they
Yeah.
you know
Hmm.
um, so this is a bit of a fast forward, but in terms of Alto Summit, what was that? What was that like? What was that session like?
um, it was cool, man. Yeah, it was cool, man. Vince was like one of my heroes, of a guy that's probably a generation before me. And of course, what can I say? Phil Woods. I mean, come on, that's like jazz royalty as far as I'm concerned. So um, there was some politics in making that record. That's why I laughed, and it's funny because I get people that talk about that particular recording and they seem to enjoy it, and I'm glad they enjoyed it. Um, I'm just thankful that I was a part of that, and I have some documentation of being with those two great musicians, and especially, like I said, Phil Woods, because he's one of the fathers, and Vince has definitely made a name of himself as one of the masters of his generation too. So I, I'm thankful to be a part of that particular situation. And I know they just did a new one with Vince, with Gary Bartz and Bobby Watson. It just came out recently, and I've heard it. It sounds really good. Um, yeah, man, it was. Without going into detail, there was a lot of stuff going on that record that cracks me up now. But any of those documentations for me are just like showing where I was at that particular time. musically, where I was emotionally, everything. It's just a snapshot of where I was. And when I listen back to them, I don't do it all the time, but when I listen back to it, I hear, okay, that's what you were working on then. Oh, this is how your sound has changed. This is how your concept has changed. Or, wow, listen to what they were doing back then, you know? So for me, it's just like, just documentation of the period, but the beauty of it is documentation with the greats.
Now, you're mentioning this snapshot and the documentation, and something uh, that I hear, that I talk about, that I hear other jazz artists talk about. And is it ever challenging for you to listen to yourself, especially like a long time ago?
Um,
It's challenging for me. That's
it probably was at one time before I just learned to look in the mirror. Um, it's great to go back and listen to that. Like I said, because that's where you were then, so you can
right.
hear. I hear some things in the past like, wow, I should bring that back. Like
Mm,
some melodic things that I heard. It's like, wow, I like that. How you sustained notes or different colors that I might have not used anymore because I went into something else. Um, so I don't find it painful. I'm just realistic about it. That's where I was 20 years ago, 30 years ago,
right.
and I'm a firm believer in the moment when you play, you give your very best. And it's funny because I was listening to Wayne Shorter and his band. They did a clinic at Berklee College of Music, I guess maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And I always tell my students, I say, when you play it like it's the last time. Play like
Yeah.
when you finish playing, somebody's going to take your horn away from you and you'll never play again. Because you don't know when you leave this classroom and heaven forbid you get hit by a bus or something where you can never pick up your horn. And if you think about the last time you played, you kind of played halfway or not 100% engaged, you would be really upset with yourself.
Mm,
But then Wayne Shorter said, instead of saying play it like it's the last time, he said play it like it's the first time. And I was like, wow. Because you think about the first time you got a chance to blow into your horn, like I told you that concert F, and how excited I was and how inspired I was, and I wanted to learn more. And it just changed my paradigm. I still believe in playing as like the last time, but like playing like it's the first time. It's almost like having a childlike nature where you see babies look around at stuff. You're like, what are you looking at? And they just looking and they're just so amazed at a color or they're amazed at something that they see for the very first time.
yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how I think when I like I said, when I go back and listen to those recordings and periodically I'll do that just to see what I was doing, how I was writing back then.
Hmm.
What was I doing harmonically? What did my sound like? And how has it changed? How has it matured? How has my melodic ideas changed because of the experiences that I have from 21 when I first started recording to 51? You
Yeah.
know.
I can hear that in your playing, that like it's the last time. You always have like a passion and intensity, a fire. There's it's that's always happening. Like I can't remember hearing you ever when I couldn't sense you know that drive in what you were playing.
Hmm.
Um, um, and I mean, and that's that. I mean, to me, that's like that's a compliment.
Thank you, brother.
you you know that's it's something that I try to do myself. I want to be playing, so I need to play like I want to be playing.
Yeah.
You know, like
Hmm.
like this is important, like it means something to me, and not just the whole kind of going through the motions kind of
Hmm.
thing, because that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help me, because music can be. It doesn't help me. It doesn't help the audience. But music can be this tremendously therapeutic thing,
Hmm.
and if we treat it like it's some kind of surface level thing, then we're never going to be able to access that therapy. Um, And
Yeah, man.
yeah,
It happens when you get into business. You think about when you were playing just for you, when you practice, just because you just wanted to get better. You
yeah,
transcribed just because you were curious about what this person was doing. You wanted to know. And then you think about, well, it's about the gig, it's about the tour, it's about the record date. You know, it's easy to get into a different kind of mindset. For me, I try my best. I don't do this all the time, but I always, before I play, I just say, God, look, use me the way you want to use me. Get Antonio out of the way, and you use me as the filter for you to come through. And
yeah,
and I always try to get to that kind of surrender in the music. And also, like, I think the thing that will stop me from being complacent or just thinking I'm just playing is, like, I realize that this is a gift, and what I try to play with is thanksgiving for that gift. Because come on,
mm,
man, how many people have saxophones? Adolph Sax died poor, but how many people you see beside you don't even know who they are, and they got like a gig bag on their shoulder, you know, and great players, amazing, tremendous players. But who knows why certain things happen? There are people that play. When I hear saxophone, I'm like, wow, they can do things that I can't do, but then I can do things that they can't do either. Right? It goes both ways. And why do you get picked? Why did I get picked for this particular situation or these situations? That's, I don't know. I try to be a professional, be on time, show up, be prepared. Try not to give people attitude. Whatever they hired me for, I give it to them. I try and I give it my everything that I have, and I've been consistent with that over the years. So that's why I've been able to work. That's why people call me, because they know the product they're going to get from Antonio Hart. But there are other people that could do it, but they can't do it as good as me, because nobody's gonna be as good as me, or I couldn't play like you. I couldn't be as good as you. You know what I mean? So it's just that thing of like playing like it's the last time, but even more so now, I'm thinking about it. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, because it's been hard to practice. I don't know how you're feeling today. It's been hard to pick up my horn, man. I had a good day the other day. My horns are right here in front of me, and just playing with Thanksgiving, like just being thankful for every second, man. I mean, there's so many people that want to play the saxophone. So many people that spend years that go to these colleges and spend thousands and thousands of dollars and buy every book and spend thousands of dollars on horns. And they get to certain levels. So when you get to another level where you can actually make a living at it, where people will appreciate what you do, people will pay for you to come places. Man, what else is there? You know,
yeah,
it's 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 the most amazing blessing. I've been around the world many times, and not only that, I didn't have to pay for it,
mm,
and I came back with money in my pocket. Are you kidding me, man? This poor kid from Baltimore. I told you where I came from. I remember the first time I went to France. Actually, I went with some guys from Berkeley. They said, "Man, you want to come to France with us this summer?" It was my first year at Berkeley. I was like, "That's a real place." I looked at books, and next thing I know, man, from I'm 18 years old, and I'm standing in the Eiffel Tower. I'm 18 years old. I'm in Bordeaux drinking wine for the first time, French wine, and the beaches, and I'm in Normandy, looking at when the cast came off the ships and stormed the beach, D-Day stuff. I'm like seeing this stuff like that I read about, and I'm here, and I'm like, this is amazing. And now, I remember the first time Roy and I went to Japan. I'm like, I'm in Japan. I'm in these places and eating noodles and stuff for the first time. Just things that I never thought would happen, man. And it's just like, wow, what a blessing, because it could happen to anybody. It could happen for anybody. I was just one of the lucky ones this time. I feel so blessed, bro.
yeah. I feel blessed too. You know, being able to do music for a living
Mm-hmm.
is like that. It's like a totally incredible. I mean, I don't know what I would do without music. First,
Mm-hmm.
um, like I would be so miserable if I had to do something else other than music. And hindsight's 2020, but and after having experienced being able to do music as a living and then not to be able to do it as a living and to
Hmm.
have to do something else, you know, it's just it's the only thing I ever wanted to do, like really wanted to do.
Hmm.
I do a lot of things because to try to keep myself engaged and um, I go to the gym and I'm a dad and I'm a husband and all of that and there's several hats that I wear, but um, the hat that I wear that seems to have always been with me is that musician hat.
Yeah, that's a part of you, man, and you're fortunate. Like we're fortunate. You said that's all you ever wanted to do. The same here, man. And I don't believe I chose to be a musician. I
Mm,
think we were born musicians,
yeah.
and we heard that call and we followed it. And you have some things in your music already, man, just based on what you told me that I don't have in my music because you said you're a husband and you're a father. I haven't done that yet. And that brings another dynamic to your artistry, man, because that's living life, that's experiences. And I dream of that, man, because I know my music will change. But I do other things too. I'm a martial artist too. Like
Mm,
that's my second passion. So I, I do that every day. That's like if I wasn't a musician, I'd be a martial art teacher or something, or something like that. I'm almost positive of that. But yeah, man, it's nice, because sometimes I used to catch the train in the morning, and I would look at people like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, or I'd come back from the park working out, and I see people going to work. And you can see on their face that they don't want to do that, bro. They do not want to do that, but that's what you have to do to put food on the table and pay your rent, And for me, it's like I look forward to going to work. You know what I
mhm.
mean? I'm excited to go to work. And even teaching at the college too, because I've been teaching at Queens College now. That's where I went to study with Master Heath, but I've been there for 20 years.
Yeah.
Um, that's challenging too because that's a whole nother hat. That's the other hat that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get students that inspire you, and sometimes they don't give you anything. You feel like you're an ever-ready battery that's just like
Oh
this.
yeah.
You know what I'm
Oh
saying?
yeah. Oh yeah.
And I used to call Mr. Heath and I remember he said, "Well, Antonio, it's hard, but if you just get that one student, it'll make it all worthwhile." And I didn't get it at the time, but then I've had a couple of those students, maybe one or two in a semester or a year. You're like, wow, okay, that makes me want to come in here and do this thing. So I'm, I'm very blessed, man, because I always laugh that like I'm a college professor, man. It's so hilarious to me, man. Not only a college professor, I'm the director of the jazz program because I'm like I didn't do well in school. My SAT score sucked. It's like I'm the head of a music program in New York City. It cracks me up, but I worked hard, man, and I've gotten better. And Master Heath blessed me with that opportunity. But yeah. I just like I said when I heard you talking about being a father and a husband, that always triggers something in me because my whole life has been like trying to be the best musician I can be, or to show my thanks to my mom's sacrifices and do all these things to the point of like it was almost just tunnel vision. So other things in life I didn't really move into, but now at this stage in my life, man, especially after like dealing with this thing, I've been in the house, brother, for 2 months by myself. And,
Mm.
I'm an only child, so I'm used to being by myself. I don't have a problem being by myself, but it's because I want to be by myself. And I'm home because I want to be home. I'm home by myself because I have to be home. I can always hear when people have like different life experiences because that's what it is. That's what you're playing, your life experiences. But
Yeah.
it's something about when someone like a child is unconditional love. That's a part of you. And I always hear that in people's music, and I always wonder like what my music would sound like if I had like that thing that I love that much, and I pray for that, man, that will come to me, man, or just the my lady that that we have that kind of bond, that real friendship, that spiritual thing, not just that physical attraction, but that thing that's, spiritual, so I
Well,
look forward to that.
do you like to be able to practice? Do you like to be able
Yeah,
to write
I heard
music?
about yeah, I heard about all this a little bit, man. I had to lay down the law. I mean, like, look, that saxophone right there was there before you. It's gonna be there when you leave. But yeah, and I mean, but that, like I said, I've been pushing this thing for 30 years, and hopefully I have 30 more years. But there's more to life than just playing the saxophone, and doing the things that I'm doing. So um, I'm sure I'll have time to practice and do the things that I want, but then some of it has to be a sacrifice. Like you, I'm sure the times you want to practice and you have to do homework, or you have to go to a school event, or you have to
You know,
go do activities.
this actually brings us to something that I want to talk to you about.
Sure.
Um, we were talking about practicing, and you know, and no one has unlimited time to practice,
Hmm.
right? So, in you were talking about when you were in school, you were practicing 12 hours a day,
Hmm.
right? Now I'm assuming that you don't have 12 hours a day now to practice.
Nah.
And
And honestly, man, when you say you practice 12 hours a day, because that was a good thing to say, Charlie Parker practiced 13 hours a day. So I practiced 13 hours, 12 hours a day. But I was playing the horn for that time. But if I really have to be honest and analyze how much time was really, really focused practicing and how much time was just kind of like being in the practice room fooling around, you know, I had the horn in my mouth for 12 hours or, whatever that was. But, so I think now when I think about practice, because I'm honest about what I need to go and practice. I have my things that I start off with my long tones, my scales, my chords, my inversions, and different things like that, or just sound things that I do. I have core things that I start off with first before I get into learning a composition or working on some harmonic structure that I'm working on. So, the core stuff will take me about 45 minutes to an hour
mm,
when I'm doing it, and everything else is icing on the cake, however long I take to do it. But the core thing is like about 45 minutes to an hour. And if I go into like 3 and 4 hours a day, when I have that time, I try to just stretch everything out. But really, like, I usually have notebooks about what I want to do,
mm.
and just take notes for myself. And so yeah, I don't even know honestly if I had 12 hours now to practice, if I would practice 12 hours a day. You know, maybe I'll practice, maybe I would read something, maybe I would sit at the computer or sit at the piano and compose. It depends on what I need to get done at that time. So it's I think, in your formal years, in your early years, is important to set that concrete, pour that concrete and have it, let it dry and get solid. So that's why you need all those hours. You just need that time to get intimate with your instrument, where it becomes a part of you. And the only way it becomes a part of you is like being intimate with it and having it all the time. I mean, I used to sleep with my saxophone, all that stuff, bro.
Mm.
I did all crazy stuff, take it apart and put it back together, and just I knew everything about the horn. I knew what it could do and what it couldn't do. Um, yeah. But I mean, initially I just did so much because, like I said, when I got to Berkeley, I was so low on the totem pole, and nobody wanted to play with me anyway. So I just wanted to practice, so I could be accepted by the heavy cats at the school. And my teacher Bill Pierce told me what to do, and I just did everything he told me to do without question. I didn't have the knowledge or the perspective to question anything. I knew I was going to the school, I was paying a lot of money, and my teacher said do this, so I did it. And when a lot of cats don't.
All right, this is to my students. out there listening and watching right now. Did you hear how Antonio Hart said that he did whatever his teacher said to do without question? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if your students are listening, yeah, because sometimes a teacher will tell you to do something, you don't get it. And sometimes it's beyond you at that particular moment. You don't understand the lesson. And sometimes you get it right then. Sometimes you get it 2 weeks later. Sometimes you'll get it 5 years later. You'll be like, oh, that's what that was.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get stuff that you learn it because knowledge is free. You don't lose anything by learning anything. But you get something maybe you can't use that. But you know what? You actually learned that to give that to somebody else.
Yeah.
So and it's hard. I teach master students so when I get them, they already think they know everything. But if your students are listening, I'll say you have an amazing teacher that has been doing it. Anybody that's been doing it longer than you successfully, you should listen. You don't lose anything. Ask questions. And learn it. If you learn, like if I tell a student to do something and they learn it and then they question what I told them, that's different. We can start on a different platform. Right. But if you don't even learn it, we can't go any further. And I do that all the time. I will have a student, I'll say, man, I gave you this 6 months ago. Now you got to learn it. You see, now you have to learn it. If you had learned it, now we could have fun. But I know it already. That's why I gave it to you.
Right.
It's up to you. I can lead you to the water, and I can tell you this is the best water in the world. I can't make you drink it.
That's right. It's funny. There's I had a kind of a similar thing when I was a kid. My dad was a great saxophone player, and so I got like 3 or 4 lessons a week, and he had real specific things he wanted me to be working on. One time in particular, he wanted me to work on a particular piece. He said, okay, I want you to do, what's the name, etude or whatever. And I told him, I don't like that. I don't like that etude. I don't want to play that one because I don't like it. And he said, well, check it out. Learn it. He says, learn it, and then when you can play it, then let's talk about it again. And of course, once I spent the time actually learning it, I actually developed an affinity for the piece, right? So sometimes like that all human beings are born lazy. I mean, you've seen a baby, right? Right. So there is that thing that if you start to get in your head too much about the work associated with learning something rather than just getting to it, you can make it a lot harder and kind of paralyze yourself even. But again, once I learned it, then I liked it. And maybe that won't be the case for everyone. Maybe they still won't like it. But as you said, that's a different conversation. If you actually learned it and then you're like, now here are my objections. These are the things that I didn't dig.
Exactly. Yeah, I find that a lot with just this generation, and I think I'm older than you for sure, but a lot of when I was coming up in school, you didn't question your teacher. That's just something you didn't do.
Yeah.
And I always found that you can be respectful and still ask questions. Yeah. But now this generation they're like, they know everything. They don't want to question. They know they have the formula. They have it all figured out. And a lot of my students are like, well, if you really had it figured out, you wouldn't be here studying with me. I'd be like reading about you in Downbeat or buying your CDs, and just take what I give you. I mean, it's funny, like all the different bands that the kids say they like, like SF Jazz Collective and all these different groups, and they be like, I see you playing with that band, Professor Hart, or you did this. I was like, yeah. I said, but I'm teaching you, and I'm not calling these people; they're calling me, right? And in my mind, like when Bill Pierce played with Art Blakey and Branford Marsalis went to Berkeley, that's why I went there. I went to Berkeley. But I said, if I had a teacher that played with Miles Davis, which I did, Kenny Garrett, I want to know everything he did to get to the point where he played with Kenny Garrett. And with Miles Davis, excuse me. And I want to do everything that he tells me to do so I can be prepared for that situation. And that's what I did. When I got to Berkeley, man, this is a funny story. Kenny Garrett was just playing with Miles. This was new. So this is like 1986. Yeah. And I was washing dishes in Baltimore trying to save money to go to school. I remember I was working in this deli and I was washing dishes and this guy put his some headphones on and said, check this out. And I heard the saxophone player. And I never heard a saxophone like that before. I was like, who the heck is that? He said, this guy named Kenny Garrett. And the album was called Double Take. It was with Freddie Hubbard and Woody Shaw and Kenny Garrett. And I was like, man, from that moment on, I was a Kenny Garrett fanatic, right? So Kenny was in Boston, I guess, going to Emilio Lyons to get his horn fixed, but he was friends with Javon Jackson. And they came across the street. And I knew what he looked like, right? And I shook his hand, and I didn't let go. I was like, and he pulled his hand, and I said, man, you're in town. Can I get a lesson? He said, yes. So he gave me the number where he was staying, and I went to take a lesson. And this is a true story. So Kenny's behind the piano. He said, do you know this? And I'm like, no. Do you know this? No. This went on for like, I don't know, 20 questions, right? Everything was no. And he just went, young brother, you got a lot of work to do. And I was really disappointed, you know? I was like, damn, my hero was like, and he said, but look, here's my number. If you have any questions, man, just reach out to me. That was a big mistake because, bruh, 3 times a week for the next 4 years, I was calling Kenny Garrett. Whether he was on the road with Miles Davis, I would just talk to his wife. But I called him all the time. Whenever his records came out, I would be the first person at Tower Records with his record. And that night I was transcribing his solos. You know, I was I was really just on his stuff, man, because he was like that mentor. And everything he told me to do, I did, to the point that when he was about to leave Miles Davis, I was supposed to take his place. You know, it didn't happen because, you know, Master Davis died. But yeah, man, I'm just like, if your teacher tells you to do something and they're successful, you know, and I always try to find, like, for me, like, whoever people are gravitating towards, I want to know why. You know, I used to see this guy on people's shirts all the time, and with dreadlocks, and like everywhere I went, I saw this guy, and I was like, "Who the heck is this guy?" And it was like, his name is Bob Marley, right? I was like, "Okay, who's this Bob Marley guy?" And then I said, "Okay, maybe, you know, the Rastafarian thing, so they always smoking herb." And I was like, "Well, I'm not associated with any of that stuff." But then I said, "Well, it's got to be more to this guy." So I got recordings, and I got his early stuff, the Rude Boy period, to all the way up to the later period. And I was like, this guy was a poet. He was, you know, he was an activist and a poet. And I saw how incredible his music was. Same thing with this guy with the guitar, with the bandana around his head, with the afro, playing all the stuff. I saw him on everybody's shirt. I was like, who the heck is this guy? Jimi Hendrix. That I started, you know, and then, and I was like, anybody that's successful, that's what I want to check out. So I started listening. And it didn't have to be jazz, man. I was like listening to that group Queen, listening to Eddie Van Halen, listening to the Beatles, who I didn't listen to before. You know, I didn't want to hear no Beatles. I was like, you know, and I saw, Paul McCartney and John Lennon got something really special going on. You know, I'm just of that school, man. And even like I go a step further, Kenny G, not the Kenny Garrett, the Kenny G, right? Of course, jazz purists, everybody will dog him and say he can't play. He can play the horn. It might not be a style that you want to hear, but he can play. You know, he played with Jeff Lorber and those guys. He can play. But like I remember we were in Thailand. We were playing for the King's 60th coronation, where it was called. I was with the Dizzy Gillespie band, and it was like Nancy Wilson was on that gig, and Chris Bodie and Regina Carter, the violin player. She's from Detroit, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So it was like a lot of people on this gig, and we just get off the stage playing all this killing stuff to Slide Hampton arrangements for the Dizzy band. I mean, we were swinging, man. We were killing. Hargrove was in that band. And then people were very, very receptive to all. But then Kenny G came on the bandstand, and like the crowd like tripled, and jazz cats were like, "Oh man, he ain't playing that." But for me, I was like, "Okay, I have a chance to really see this really close up," because I was backstage and I was like looking at the audience and looking at him. Now musically, it was, you know, my man is Grover Washington, you know, or Kirk Whalum or those kind of
Right,
cats, right?
right, 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 right.
But what I did see that struck me was the people in the audience were so happy. They were so engaged in the music. He gave them something that was accessible and something that made them feel a part of it. It wasn't too over their heads, but they were just so happy. And I said, that's what I want when I play my music. I want people to feel like they can relate, they can have a good time. Because once you do that, once you have them, then you can play whatever you want to play. Because
Yeah.
you got them engaged, And a lot of people, well, I'm just playing my music, and if you don't get it, that's not it, man. Yeah, you want to stimulate yourself as an artist, and you want to play things that make you feel good too. But as much as you're an artist, you're an entertainer too, and people are paying money to come see you.
Yeah.
You know, and they want to be engaged. And I saw that from Jimmy Heath. I saw that from James Moody, Sly Hampton, John Faddis. All the people that I had a chance to play with, man. Great entertainers, and it took nothing with Dizzy Gillespie. Took nothing away from their art. Their art was still, on the highest level, but they knew how to connect with people. And those are the people that kept on coming back to see them over and over again and feeling good and feeling music. And they could come out with something crazy and people would still buy it. So yeah, I mean, I went off track with that thing, man. But
Oh
yeah, I
no,
think
no, 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 no. This is great. We're improvisers. That's all right.
yeah. Yes,
um,
sir.
um, uh, you were talking about practicing,
Uh-huh.
and you sort of implied that when you're younger, you have to sort of you need a critical mass of hours, like under
Yeah.
your belt of practicing.
Mm-hmm.
And once you've accumulated that number of hours, then we can be a lot more efficient with what it is that we practice. We can be more targeted, and
Correct.
it may not take as much time to get to the place where we're actually making progress in a practice session. Hopefully, if you're doing something over the course of your life, you get better at it, you get more
Mm-hmm.
efficient at it. Hopefully,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I interviewed John Clayton, uh, and John I asked him the question about practicing, and he said, well, I don't practice as many hours now because I've already developed the muscles, the the and I yeah, so there's like this physical aspect of playing the instrument that we have to develop, an actual muscle strength to be able to actually physically be able to handle the instrument, and you can't develop that unless you're spending many hours practicing, to get that, the strength and endurance together, to play with, play ferociously for a 3 hour gig.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have endurance and muscle strength in order to do that. Um, Now you were talking about like a routine that you have. Um, can you give me an example of something right now that you're maybe dissatisfied with in your playing, or something that you want to work on, or maybe a tune or something that you're working on, and maybe like your approach to sort of tackling that?
For me, right now, one of my main objectives is to open my ears and to hear which is sounds kind of like, well, that's what you do. You're a musician. You hear. A lot of times we practice so much, we work out things. We have devices that we use, and especially a lot of students that go through academia because they all sound great. They have amazing facility. They know harmony. They can play in fives and sevens and two and a halves. They can do all that stuff, like play in altissimo range. But I find a lot of times they're not listening. They're not listening to what's going on around them. So it's like not a communication between the group. It's just like this one person playing. And almost the rhythm section almost becomes like a Jamie Ingersoll tape. They're just playing
Mm.
behind them. But when I'm saying listening, like where you actually hear what you play before you play it, not thinking about what you
Yeah.
play before you play it. And I got that from my one of my mentors, Gary Bartz. He always talks about how people don't listen. And I thought about that because, in my earlier development, that was what I was doing. I was learning all these techniques and harmony, transcribing people. And, you start fitting them in because it works and it sounds good because the masters did it and you want to do it too. It's like people playing Charlie Parker lines, right? But
Yeah.
like actually hearing what you play before you play it. Again, that gets back to spending time on your instrument, being intimate with your instrument, because you need to be able to feel the vibration of what
Mm.
that note feels like.
Yeah.
So when you hear it here, it goes from here to here and comes out, however way, whatever way. But, so what I'm working on now is like, I really want to be as melodic as possible. So I'm thinking about even when I want to play something that might be interesting structurally, harmonically, intervallically, where it still sounds like a melody, where it still sounds like someone singing. So
Mm.
I want my instrument to sound like a voice now. Not that I didn't have, aspects of it through my career, but more so now that's what I'm thinking about. So that may mean sometimes I'm playing less than I would normally play or than how I played before, which might not be so interesting to like somebody that's listening for, I had students like, but, I hear you playing with Dave Holland and you playing all this stuff. Show me that stuff. I'm like, yeah, I can show it to you, but you wouldn't know what to do with it yet. I'll give it to you. If that's what you want, that's what you're paying for. But what I'm trying to get you to do is like, think about melody. Listen to singers, and it doesn't have to be Sarah Vaughan and Carmen McRae or Billie Holiday, but listen to good singers. Listen to Mahalia Jackson. Listen to I particularly like what's her name? She died. What was her name? Amy Winehouse.
Mm.
Stylistically, I like her. The Lady Gaga can sing. Certain things. Of course it doesn't matter. Marvin Gaye, Smokey Robinson. Listen to singers. Listen to how they phrase. Listen for melody. Listen for space. Listen for articulations. I'm really big on that. Like if you ask anybody that really studies with me, I talk about what makes music. You can play everything that you want to play, but how is it articulated? What are the dynamics? How do you articulate it? How do you deal with space? How do you deal with all the colors? So that's part of my active practice because I talk about it all the time, but I'm always thinking about that. And going back to yourself, as painful as it is sometimes, I always record myself because I want to hear what I'm doing. I'll pick a ballad or a song and I'll play it 20, 30 times. I just let tape, put recording on my iPhone or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll play it different ways every
Right.
time. And I want to see what affects me, what makes me feel this emotion. And that's what I keep, So it definitely is a cranial kind of thing, but I'm trying to get to the heart. So when I'm playing, I'm doing it. So those are the things I'm working on. I have some some harmonic things that I've been putting in books for years, and now I'm really trying to figure out how to apply the things that I like,
Mm-hmm.
that I've been afraid to use,
Mm-hmm.
because it takes time to put that in your playing, right?
Right.
So when I'm practicing, like I said, for me, the main thing that I'm working on now, I listen to people that I think are melodic players. Gary Bartz is, for me, my king of that. I really love listening to Gary Bartz. Um, I listen, of course, to Johnny Hodges. Enough said, you know. Um, who else do I like listening to for that? I love Eric Dolphy,
Mm.
you know. Now I like Eric Dolphy, and I've been listening to him a lot lately. I like him because he just represents so many different things. When I hear Eric Dolphy, I hear a kid playing outside.
Mm.
You know? I hear like this kid just like actually looking up in the sky and looking at the tree and hearing the birds and be like, oh, this is what a bird sounds like, because that's what he was doing. You
Mm.
know, I hear somebody that has like no fear, like is confident in themselves, grounded in themselves, and able to express themselves even when it wasn't accepted by anybody else. The courage to play like that, man. And all the people that we love had that kind of courage. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
Louis Armstrong. They didn't like Louis Armstrong when he was a Fletcher Henderson. You know, with Don Redman and those guys, man. And this guy changed the way we conceptualize the music. You know, singers and playing wise. You know, but almost everybody, Charlie Parker, like everybody we can name, and when they first came out, people didn't really dig them so much because they were individuals, man. And we got to get back to that. So my like going into a big circle, just trying to really identify like my identity playing the saxophone or the flute or in my composition. I'm really thinking about that, but more so like I'm really thinking about how my music can be more melodic, how my music can be accessible, not making it popular music, but how it can be accessible and how I can still use the tools that I want to use, but put it in that context,
Yeah.
you know? So those are things I think about all the time when I listen to music or anything that I gravitate towards, man. And it's funny because, you know, I have recordings of everybody. Sometimes I want to go back and listen to Jackie McLean or whoever it might be. Sometimes I just want to listen to Bartok or
Mm.
Debussy. You know, sometimes I just want to listen to, like, I can't tell you how many times I've listened to What's Going On, and that's because of Rodney Whitaker. Rodney Whitaker, he turned me on to What's Going On with Marvin Gaye. You know, sometimes I just want to listen to any kind of gospel music that I can hear. Sometimes I just want to hear Mississippi Delta blues. You
Mm.
know, it just depends on it really depends on the day.
Now you were talking about gospel music now, and you've said a few things about being grateful, being thankful, about thanking God for
Hmm.
opportunities and things. Um, uh, you're a spiritual person. It seems like uh, you're looking to uh, a creator, someone that's greater than you, that's provided opportunities and things. Can you talk a little bit maybe about how your sense of spirituality has influenced your playing? Um, and yeah, I guess that's it.
Man, I've gone through so many different roads with spirituality and different approaches: the Christian approach, the Buddhist approach, curiosity about Eastern philosophies and things like that. Um, what I come to realize, and I'll find out when I leave this plane if I was right or not, but there's only one, you know, and whatever name you decide to call it, there's only one. And I know, like I said, the way for me there has to be that source God, because for the things that happened in my life, for me to be here talking to you today, it had to be some kind of divine thing. My grandmother's prayers and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
that have watched out for me and guided me, because left to my own devices, I probably should be dead now. I could have been dead several times, you know. And so I'm very appreciative of it. I'm very conscious of that thing, and I feel that thing. It's not just like I believe in it. I feel it going through my veins. And especially like you said, how you knew you wanted to be a musician when you were young. That's all you ever wanted to be. I felt that was like that. And when I play, that's the closest I get to like really having true communion with the
Mm.
creator.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like I'm talking to you now. I've gotten better with talking to people, man. But for a long time, I couldn't talk. But I felt like the best way I could talk, and still today, is when I play that horn.
Hmm.
You know, so um, I don't know. I can't speak for how people feel this, but for me, there's no way I can do anything that I'm doing without having respect and having admiration and being thankful for those gifts that's coming from the Creator. And I know, man, because I've spent many nights on my knees, man, praying about all kinds of things, and things have happened, man, and continue to happen. You know, and like I said, like that whole communication and being melodic and things that I'm trying to say in my music. That's what I'm trying to say without saying like, Antonio has a Bible or Quran or whatever. That doesn't even matter. It's just like being that light,
Hmm.
being that positive light. And when I'm playing, when I'm communicating with somebody, I just want to be that positive light. And I wasn't always that person, bro. People that knew me early on be like, wow. And some people like, I don't like Hart. Hart's full of this and this. But I've been blessed to be here this long, so I can grow and evolve as a person.
Hmm.
So it's like the people that have the open hearts and see, be like, oh, that's how he was now. Look at him now. You know. But even if they don't acknowledge that, it doesn't matter. It's like me being thankful for having this time to have a new day, to be better, to get closer to the source and try to do and to be that light. So that's kind of how I live my life, man. I just try to be better every day. Sometimes, man, I'm not the best Antonio, and then some days I do well. When I teach, sometimes I'm not the best teacher, but in other days, students are thanking me for the lessons they have. Sometimes I might not be the best son, but I try my best. Or it's just. But I Master Heath, the whole time I've known him, I never known him to go to church. The whole 30 years I know him, but he was one of the most spiritual people I ever met in my life. You know, James Moody, he was into Baja, like Dizzy Gillespie and stuff like that. He was even into like Master Moody was into like extraterrestrials and all that stuff. He used to give me these books about all
Hmm.
the Martians and spaceships and stuff like that. Was his thing. He was serious. He was like, Antonio, why you read the Bible? And I was like, Master Moody, you know what? We're not gonna have that discussion. I love you, but we're not even gonna have that discussion, right? You do you and you. But one of the most spiritual people I've ever met in my life, man. It's just I don't really put a definition on it. It's just when you feel it, when somebody's just like being sincere, just somebody that's like being thankful. This is a blessing, man. This is every day is a blessing. Every day that we can wake up and we can pick up our horn. Every day that we can just wake up. It's a blessing, and I don't take it for granted, man. Because as we see, man, 100,000 people are dead right now. From that disease. So that's just, or I remember like being in this living room, and I used to have a TV over here. And I remember the morning that building 9/11, when the World Trade Center went down. And I'm sitting here getting dressed, getting ready to go teach at the college. And I get a call from a friend in Israel. She said, "You okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, what's up?" She said, "America just got bombed." I was like, "America just got bombed." And I'm looking at this on TV, but I had the TV the sound down. And I said, "Oh, my building's on
Yeah.
fire," right?
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at this, like I'm in Brooklyn, so I'm right across from Manhattan. Like this way is Manhattan, and there's a building right here, and there's people that have a terrace. I'm on the low floor, but these people on the terrace, and I heard people going, "Oh my God!" Started screaming, right? And I'm like, "What are they screaming at?" And I watched the second plane going into the building, and I hear this boom, bro. It was like the loudest car crash. I could hear it. It was boom, and then I watched like because the antennas were on top of the World Trade Center, so like my regular channels disappeared, but I was able to get one grainy channel, and I watched the buildings come down. I watched, and I used to have I used to have a financial planner. He was on the 80 something floor. I used to go up there all the time. deal with business. These buildings were huge, the World Trade Center buildings, man. So after that, man, and things like that, I don't take anything for granted, man. I'm just thankful for because those people, somebody, they went to work. The guy who I used to go see on the 82nd floor, he was there when the first plane hit. He was in his building, and they said, "You guys stay put. Don't leave this building." He was like, "Are you crazy?" He left. He left the guy that was cleaning, one of the guys that was like, one of the custodian workers. The guy had 5 days left. He was going to retire. He stayed. He died. You know, you think about all those kind of things, man, and just
Yeah.
us being as men of color, man. Look at the brother that that just the guys just shot him dead, down there,
Yeah.
and just all those things, man. I could have been a statistic in Baltimore, man, because all my boys were drug dealers. You know, all of them. You know, half of them guys, if they're not in the system, they're not around or they're sick. And I'm so thankful, man, because I hung out with those guys, but they wouldn't let me hang out with them. You know what I mean? They were like, "Yo, you the college guy. Go get your education." They thought that much about me, man, because it's so. Like I said, I don't know why all this stuff happened. Why God showed grace on me, and I'm just trying to do my best at this point to show my appreciation for it for the time that I'm here. I don't know why I had Master Heath in my life as my mentor, or somebody like James Moody and these master musicians that like took me under their wings. Because they could have chose anybody, but they chose me, man. I'm so thankful for that, man. Like I'm getting like kind of emotional now when I'm talking about it, man, because it's like I didn't think that was gonna happen for me, bro. You know what I mean? I didn't. This this stuff wasn't in my plan. My plan was to go back to Baltimore and just do my thing. So, but as much as I've been given this grace, I work my butt off, bro. So for the young musicians and your students, you can be super talented. You still got to work. You can be maybe not as talented or as the next guy, and I don't like that word so much as maybe your message is not as clear as that person at that particular time. But you just got to work because there are a ton of people that they said were just average, and then they became like great because of their work
Yeah.
ethic.
Yeah.
John Coltrane was one of those guys.
Yeah.
So it's just being thankful, not trying not to waste time, living life, and just trying to be happy, man. It's just we're living in some crazy, crazy times right now. So it's hard to be inspired. It's hard to be happy, but it's going to change, and we got to this is the time that musicians, and I told my students this too. I said, all those guys that are playing all this fancy stuff, I said, one day it's going to get so far out there that the people that are playing melodies and melodic and can sing and change that, those are the people who are going to work. And we're at that time now. We're at that time right now. When it starts to open up again, people are not going to want all that crazy stuff. They're not going to hear all that. They just want to be like, they want to groove, hear something that's nice and pretty, you know, watch. Guaranteed.
Well,
Guaranteed.
and my thoughts on that is that it's kind of always been that way anyway. I just think that there have been pockets of time when progressively more sort of esoteric and um, sort of intellectually challenging sort of sonic space
Right.
has created a little bit more space for itself. But in my mind, that's always been a temporary thing. That
Yeah.
was never going to go. It was never going to be for for
Yeah.
very long. And that's not the same as saying that um, uh, no longer will the same level of musicianship be required. It's not the same thing at all.
Right.
It's you. We will just be channeling the musicianship uh, with a more palatable intent. So we went through this whole thing, and it seemed like maybe it peaked maybe 15 years ago, but there was a lot of a lot of talk about playing music for yourself and pleasing yourself, when you're playing, and it was all about that and not very much about the audience, about the other people, or frankly, even about the other musicians on the stage with you. It was all about this sort of self-centered kind of approach to enjoyment of music. So I just have to play for myself, and that's all that matters. And as long as I'm happy, that kind of thing. Now, that's not 100% wrong, but it's missing that. But what about the audience? But what about the community? But what about the tradition? What about? I mean, we're just temporarily holding this torch. We're not going to have it for very long, and we're going to have to give it up at some point. So where's the continuity in that sort of very kind of self focused approach to playing this music?
Well, it's up to us to expose the next generations to that. Just that, like I said, sitting in that band with James Moody and those guys for so many years, Frank West, they passed it on to me, and I got to pass it on. You
Mm.
know, even in the institutions, there are great institutions in New York City with fine musicians, but there's a lot of stuff in terms of our tradition that they don't know. And some of it's because some of the teachers don't know it,
Right.
you know. So you can only learn what your teachers teach you. And then, some of it is the students not being curious. I have students that come from Taiwan and China and Singapore and Israel, different parts of the world. And I'm like, you're coming to my culture. You're coming to this place to learn about a culture, but you know nothing about the people that created it. Jazz, or whatever you want to call it, is not about chord scales and harmony. There's history behind it, and you want to know about the people, and you need to know something about the continent of Africa and where these people came from before they came into Middle Passage and blended that African culture with this European culture. You need to understand that. And then what happened during Reconstruction? What happened, during the Industrial Revolution? What happened during the wars, Korean War, Vietnam? I mean, up to today, you need to know why Paul Robeson is important, why Louis Armstrong is important. You can throw a name out there. Everybody knows Louis Armstrong for jazz, but why is he important? It's not just a name. Why are these people important? Why is Charlie Parker important? Why is Dizzy Gillespie important?
Yeah.
And I tell them, like, if I went to, like, because I studied Chinese martial arts, I've been to China 13 times. I went there playing music, but also I went to Shaolin Temple because I love the martial arts. I went to my style comes from southern China, Fushan. I went to Fushan because I wanted to see the place where my martial arts came from. I met the grandmaster. I met one of his first students who was 93 years old. I went to his house and talked to him like 2 months before he died. I ate the food that they ate there. I wanted to know about the culture. That's why I kept on going back to China. Why I wanted to know, how did this martial arts go from there to there, and how to get to the United States. And you come into the United States to study music, you think you just can learn in the classroom, and I'm offended by that because you know nothing about the music. Technically, you can play it, but that other stuff that we're talking about, that stuff that you can't learn in the school, I tell them to go to the church. I'm like, I'm not trying to turn you into a Christian. I could care
Yeah.
less what your religion is. I said, but
But that's where
I
this
can't
music
take
comes
you.
from.
Yeah, I can't take you into the cotton fields and have you pick cotton. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But you can go to the church. And I said, you might be a language gap. You might not understand what the minister is talking about. That's not the point. It's like to
Right.
feel the choir, feel the congregation, feel how the pastor tells his sermon. It's almost like a solo. Usually it's a beginning, a peak and an end. It's a
Right.
solo.
That's right.
But when the pastor says that word, and I said how he articulates or how she articulates, and then you get people, amen, yes, I hear you. That's a solo. That's the
Right.
call and response.
That's right. That's right.
You know, it's like it's a tradition. But
Yeah.
if you don't see that and you're not curious about it, yeah, you'll play well. You'll have your degree and you'll sound good, but you don't know anything about the real culture and you don't know anything about the music.
That's
You
right.
know, yeah, I talk about that all the time.
Yeah. Antonio, I gotta get you to Ohio State sometime soon here when this thing is
Love to come,
over.
brother. Love to
Yeah.
come out there. I haven't
Uh,
been there since what was my man that was running the jazz department a long time ago?
it would have been probably Ted McDaniel.
Ted McDaniel.
Yeah, Dr. Ted McDaniel. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was man that I came out there twice. One time we played with Hargrove, and one time I played with my band.
Mhm.
Yeah, we were out there twice, man. Yeah.
So that was. I mean, well, you haven't been there since I started. I've been there since 2004.
No, this is the '90s, bro. Because
Yeah, yeah, right,
I was with Hargrove in '90. I was with Hargrove from '90 to '93, and
right.
then I probably went out there with my band probably around '95 or '96.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
But I remember Dr. McDaniel saying that th- that you had been there for the festival at one
Mm-hmm.
point. But I want to bring you back sometime, and even if it's just to maybe come and play with the faculty and do like
Love
a
to,
master
bro.
class or something, that'd be
Love to, man.
very cool.
Just let's make it happen, man. Anything that's going to further this music and allow us to have a connection and just pass it on. Like you said, we've been given this torch, and I'm realizing that even more so now, man. That I have a responsibility to give this stuff because a lot of stuff that I share with these kids is not stuff that I read in books. It's stuff that I experienced on the road or in the studio or talking to these guys. It's a different experience. You can read all you want about the history, but you hear somebody. I'm having lunch with Frank West, and he's telling me what it was like to play in Count Basie's band.
Hmm.
Or Nat sitting with Nat Adderley, he's telling me what it was like to play with his brother and the things they did. Or Mr. Heath telling me what it was like when he gave his horn to Charlie Parker for a week and then waited at the end of the gig to get his horn back because he wasn't sure if Charlie Parker was going to pawn his horn. You know, those kind of stories. Or I got a tape from Mr. Heath of what Miles Davis sounded like before he lost his voice, man.
Hmm.
I don't know, have you ever heard that?
No, I haven't.
Oh man, I was like, Mr. Heath, that's not Miles Davis. Yeah, Antonio, that's Miles Davis. Miles Davis, like, yes, we're gonna play a song like that's how Miles Davis sounds, bro. I swear to you, bro. I have it on tape, so I gotta find it. I was like, that can't be Miles. Mr. Heath said, that's what Miles before he had his operation and everything. Yeah, sir, we're gonna. I was like, that's not Miles Davis, Mr. Heath. He said, yeah, Antonio, that's what Miles used to sound like.
That's hilarious, man.
Oh man, those cats were so fun, man. And I would be in Mr. Heath's house all the time. I would just go see him. We would have dinner. We had dinner all the time, but and the one thing I would sit there, man, and the phone would ring, bro, and I swear to you, it would be like Benny Carter, it would be Barry Harris or Sonny Rollins, and man, they called each other. They loved each other. They didn't really talk about music. They might be like, Antonio's sitting over here. Oh, I tell him, hello. And then they would be talking about Sugar Hill. They would talk about Joe Lewis and Max Schmeling. They would
Mm,
talk about Mr. Heath was a big fan of Take Six.
mm.
So he turned Sonny Rollins on to Take Six. Like it was just like love, man. Cats called Milt Jackson. They would call and just ask how people are doing. It was like a family. And I would hope that it gets back to that. And there's little pockets of communities that I see, man. But we just got to get back to the love. Like you said, the love of what we do because we knew that's all we've ever wanted to do. And we've been blessed to be able to do it and to make a career at it when so many couldn't.
Yeah.
You know, some guys have to do day jobs and they do the music on the side because, just circumstance, whatever. I've never had to do that. Did the teaching thing because Mr. Heath asked me, and I was like kind of tired of being on the road. But I made a living as a musician for many years, just solely doing that. So it's I feel really blessed, man. But yeah, all you gotta do is call me, bro. I'll come out. We'll make it happen.
That's great. I want to give you an opportunity to maybe plug a project that you're working on, or maybe talk about a composition that you're working on or something. I mean, like, do you have something that you wanna plug?
Well, a lot of things are just I'm working on a suite. I've written the first movement, and it's dealing with my martial arts. So it's bridging the music and the martial arts. I study a form of kung fu called Wing Chun, which is from southern China. It was made famous probably in the States by Bruce Lee before he created his own style called Jeet Kune Do. And we have three hand forms. The first one's called Silam Tao. The next one comes Chom Q. Next one called Bu Ji. And then we have this thing called the wooden dummy. And we have two weapons, the 8.5-foot pole, and we have the butterfly sword knives. I'm writing music that goes along with each form. I'm creating a suite that's going to be the whole Wing Chun form, but through music.
That's killing, man.
So I'm working on it. Like I said, I had the first movement, and but I have to do a lot of research, man, because everything that I'm writing has to deal with the movements and what's happening, and try to capture the spirit of each thing we're doing. And I haven't completed this system, so like the butterfly swords, I'm not there yet. So I have to wait till I get to that point for that section. So I'm working on that, and I'm also working on a book, man, which I've been working on for a couple years off and on. And it's going to be a method book, but I think it's going to be a little different than some of the books that come out there because it's from the perspective of somebody saying, you know what, I want to play the saxophone. So how do I get started? So I'm taking you from ground zero, like how to choose a horn, how to choose a teacher. This is what a saxophone is. This is how you put together and all this stuff. Before I get into techno things, like talking about embouchure, talking about breathing, talking about just posture, everything. Like so, it's like really taking you from zero to a point. I want to have volumes of it. That then when it gets intermediate and advanced, but that's something I think that's really needed, man. Because I mean, when I was teaching at the Jamie Emerson camps, I would go to the library, because there's all those publications, and I would see what people were writing. A lot of stuff said the same thing, and it was like giving a lot of information. But I think there's some things that have been missing in some of those books,
Yeah.
and I'm just basing it off my my teaching for 20 years, and I had graduate students that I still had to do basic things with. To teach them how to breathe correctly, to have sound, and how to think about the horn, the science of the horn, and things like without getting too heady, but making it accessible. And I think it's something that I pray is something that people can use.
That's very cool, man. That's very cool. I'd be totally into to checking that out. And when you get to the place where you're ready to maybe send it around to some publishers, my book, How to Improvise Over Chord Changes, was published on Hal Leonard.
Yeah, yeah.
I can maybe try to connect you there.
Beautiful, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, man. Anything. Like this summer is like really the plan to really put some time into that. Because I went on sabbatical a couple years ago, man, and I was in China actually for most of that sabbatical, and I was writing like every day. I would just go to a tea shop and just write, and then I got back into teaching. It's like it's hard to maintain that, but that's like with all the stuff going down, man. I told myself any projects and things that I wanted to do in life, it's time. There's no time to be wasted anymore because nothing. And when you get older, you realize that too. But nothing is promised, man. So
No.
I need to like just do it.
Well, Antonio, I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and like I've known your music for a long time, and like I said, we met one time, but we didn't talk much. Um, when we met, I mean, we were kind of rushing. You were like by the
Hmm.
bandstand and stuff, um, but I always wanted to have a chance to connect with you and just rap and just talk about music and everything. And I found that we have a whole lot in common. I mean, much of what you've said, almost everything you said, I resonate with really deeply. Like it's uncanny. And one thing that's interesting too is uh, so this is going to be episode 43 of the quarantine interviews. And one thing that's interesting is there seems to be this it's an individual path, but so many things uh, in common with uh, great musicians with their path towards being a great musician. There's like these. Like I said, it's always individual. It's always a kind of a different angle on it, but it always includes the same sorts of events that have to transpire in a certain in a certain way.
Hmm.
Uh, and so it's really been a great thing to connect with you all, and in particular to connect with you, and I hope that we can stay connected. Like I said, I want to try to bring you out to Ohio State sometime, and I hope we can collaborate and maybe do some playing sometime.
Yeah, man. And even if that, that doesn't happen, we're in touch now, man. We just talk. We just kind of had our little fellowship, which is our introduction. So, man, I would love to brainstorm with you, brother. See, you tell me more about what you're doing, and it might help me in my path too. So this was an honor, you know, that you wanted to do that with me, man. So I'm thankful. I hope that whoever listens to this gets something positive out of it, and yeah, let's keep it going, man. Let's keep it going.
Well, who else am I going to interview if I don't interview Antonio Hart? Come on, man.
Oh, bro, I can give you a list of I can give you a list of cats, bro. But I feel thankful, man. Like I said, I feel thankful that people have supported me my career all these years, man, and think my humble effort has inspired some people, man. It humbles me, man, when you see like kids transcribing you and they're putting it on the internet, man. A couple times I had tears in my eyes, man, because I'm like, really? Wow, that's man, that's what a it's like it's a humbling experience, man. I don't even know how to express it, but and they they want to take lessons and stuff. I'm like, really? You want to take a lesson with me? It's like it's still crazy to me, man.
Yeah.
But I'm so thankful, bro, and I'm thankful for you and what you're doing, man. And like I said, this is our first real conversation, and I hope we continue to do that. And just blessings to you and your family,
Thank you,
and
man. Appreciate that.
just yeah, let's just keep the connection going, brother.
All right, man. Well, I'll see you later. You be safe.
You too, brother. Blessings.
All right. Blessings.